with my computer.
I do not hear that humming, Chase. I don't hear it because we are now live. But hello, everybody. It's the Halloweekly Q&A from Strength Club. This one is going to be about choosing your bench accessories, haunted or spooky pectorals edition. We are starting a little bit late, 18 minutes late to be precise. So thanks for joining us if you do join. Chase, what's going on here? What are we doing today?
We're trying to build the pecs, man, and fuck the rest. No, I mean, we're kind of doing this string of accessory talks and just what they bring to the table with programming. We've now came across the bench. We've done the press, kind of the pulling accessories and the squat. Now it's
Did we do
everyone's
the squat
favorite
yet? I
bench.
thought we just did
I thought we
press,
had. I thought we
dead,
did like the.
bench.
Do we not do like pause squats and
I
hip
don't think we
squats and all
have
that
yet.
stuff? Well,
That's next
that's
week.
yeah, it's next week. Sorry, I didn't mean
Spoily
to spoil
woilies.
anything. Yeah, no, I'm spoiling everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the upper body stuff usually goes through a lot of changes, and a lot of exercise selection is brought with those changes. So that's why we're here to talk about today.
Absolutely, yeah. So what this channel is, just in general, if this is your first time joining us, this is Strength Club. My name is Alex Kosari, and below me is Chase Lindley. We are two starting strength coaches, and the point of all of this is to kind of elucidate some more material that starting strength has put out into the universe, into a video-friendly format, a little bit more long form, a little bit, less up our own ass than most podcasts. If you have any questions when you're joining us, please feel free to put them in the chat. And then we also have a lot of videos to get through. We do form checks of people on the channel and then some of our coaching clients as well. If you want to reach us, there's Chase at Chase Lindley and then Chase 2.0, Chase _ Lindley. Make sure to follow both of these accounts. You can find me at my website here. And if you want to get videos on the show, we do review a lot of people's form checks. That will be support at strength.club. If you want to shout out to Mick. Chase and I do online coaching. If you're interested in that, reach out to us there. Mick definitely does not. We're going to switch formats now. Bye-bye. Okay, so starting this off with a quote from our fearless leader, Mark Ripito. You're thinking too hard about this. And then the
I
cuckolded
don't see the
Robin from.
screen change on my end,
I
Alex.
think it's there for me now.
Maybe it's my computer. I don't know.
It's Phoebe's computer. This is all her fault. Chase has some
Okay.
disk repair errors that's going on. Just a new computer today.
Yep.
Yeah, so we're talking about the bench accessories. This is basically going to be the rough outline for what we're going to be doing today, including some form checks. So those are going to be kind of spliced in throughout the whole thing. But we're going to start with why would you need variation in the bench press just at all? Can I just do the comp lifts forever? Why not? Then we're going to go over the options like changes to grip, changes to range of motion, changes to tempo, possibly angle, things like an incline bench, when we want to implement all of these things, and then how we want to track our responses. Chase, why do you think we need bench accessories in the first place? Why can't we just do comp bench forever?
The bench is kind of a weird-headed beast here, with the sense that it is the only upper body exercise in our arsenal that kind of experiences some eccentric stress. So that kind of carries over into a bunch of tendonitis issues. If you're really handling the bench a lot, you can really tweak a pec. So with these variations, we kind of can modify the range of motion, the load, to where we're still making progress with the stress throughout the week, but not beating the shit out of ourselves with just, like you're saying, doing comp bench all the damn time.
Yeah. As much as we always, as some crowds would like to say, it's almost entirely load management. Sure, there is an aspect to that, but if you just kind of do one thing forever, it will definitely get stale in terms of like your physiological response, in terms of things like what some people used to call overuse things. It's just like that's why a lot of sports have seasons to let all of these little tiny things heal. In the same way, where it's like, hey, if you're doing your comp paused bench 4 times a week and you're trying to get your bench up, it's probably going to be pretty annoying, both psychologically and physically. So we like to have a lot of variation in there for the bench press because you can get pretty similar results out of it, if not better results for the person, because they're going to be a little more excited about training. You're going to tackle it with more enthusiasm, I think. Unless it's not okay. You're going to do like your 1.5, 2 count pause comp bench every day forever. There are some people out there who really like that stuff, but it's not really for most people. So variation is needed, once you're into the intermediate stage of the game where it's like, hey, I can't progress on my straight bench sets across 2 or 3 times a week now. Like I know I need to bench 4 times a week now, but if I actually bench 4 times a week, it's just a ton of stress to recover from. So I need some like less stressful benching variations that I can use on these extra days. So we're going to go and start with programming the bench. We'll just do some light programming notes for bench. And then after that, we'll get into the specific accessories. So what about frequency? Talk to us about frequency, Chase, on the bench.
For my own experience, about 3 days is probably the most I probably would do with heavy frequency with the bench.
Is that including an environment where the person is also pressing, or is that someone who just only wants to
Yeah,
bench?
probably. I would if someone's focusing on the bench, they're going into a competition where the bench is contested, maybe 3 days of you benching and then twice of pressing, or even just once of pressing, just about how much stress you can actually handle without again fatiguing you or tweaking anything. But I myself, I've gone pretty far with only twice benching in the week, where just the press has definitely helped me kind of carry over some of the stress, but
Hmm.
um, the bench doesn't really need that much in frequency compared to like the press.
Yeah, the press and like the other technical lifts, like snatch and clean and whatnot,
Hmm.
they're incredibly reliant on the on frequency. One thing I will note, I put pec size question mark under there, is frankly because it's like the bench. It's a really muscle mass dependent lift.
Hmm.
It's like you are not going to see someone benching big without like big well shaped pecs. They believe there's some solid data points out there in relationship to like muscle mass on the chest and for the pecs in relationship to strength. Like if you get some muscle mass, get some meat on your chest, you're going to get some bench strength as well. It's not really something where someone's gonna be walking around with like 10-pound pecs and only benching 185. Just kind of doesn't happen. In terms of frequency considerations, I'd say higher frequency than Chase is because I think Chase, you maybe I don't know, man. If I have people who are interested in the powerlifting world, I'll have them press maybe once a week, maybe
Hmm.
if that. It's like we'll have dedicated pressing blocks whenever we're letting the bench kind of like pull off the gas there. But if someone's like, hey, in the next 6 months I have the bench test, it's like, yeah, dog, we're going to bench, 3 to 5 times a week. Because there's almost something that you can do to increase that bench strength. So as for the novice, it's kind of like that 1.5, sometimes two, sometimes one time a week. Intermediate, almost always 2.5 to 3 times. And when you start
Hmm.
specializing the bench, I would really say anyone who's interested in competing in powerlifting is going to be considered them a bench specialist at that point because it's they don't care about their dumbbell bench or their overhead press at that point or their dip. The pressing movement they really care about is the bench. That's when frequency goes up. Volume considerations, definitely a frequency function like we talked about in previous episodes. But Chase, how do you feel about volume on the bench press? We can definitely handle more, but how do you like to prescribe that?
I kind of do mine in waves again. I kind of do it by weekly how my client is feeling. But I help my own experience. I've done 4 sets of 8 with frequency, or I'm sorry, with volume, and then on my kind of like the intensity aspect, I've also kind of hit heavy with the volume with 10 singles, 8 singles. So the bench can kind of handle a lot with volume more so than the press.
Yeah, absolutely for sure. Like it's less holistically stressful,
Hmm.
or stressful across the entire system. Like if you're doing like like an Olympic style press, it really just I don't want to say beats up your whole body, but like it costs a non-zero amount in terms of fatigue. But when it comes to like the bench press, for example, you can get away with some volume stuff that you really are not going to get away with on like the deadlift,
Hmm.
for example. So like if someone was like, okay, I want you to do a 4x8 deadlift today, you'd be like, what? That's
Yeah.
silly at best. Like the nicest way I can say this is that's a little bit stupid to do a 4x8 there, unless it's a very light RDL or something like that. It's just not going to
Hmm.
happen. But in terms of the bench, there are going to be those days where it's okay. We're just putting some meat on your bones. There's going to be some higher volume days in there. Um, One thing that I really like in terms of distribution of intensity is just to always keep something relatively heavy in, even if I know this person isn't going to be touching a true single for like 5 or 6 months. Just practice singles to kind of help things feel comparatively light. Use it as your weather vane for the day. It's like that Mike Toucher single at 8 that he popularized a few years ago. But it just works super well. It's like, hey, I want you to go hit something decently heavy and then actually do your full workout after there.
Hmm.
Because I think technically, the bench does have a tricky bar path, which we can talk about as well. But it needs some attention. Like if you're very used to just benching light weights that you don't have to care about the bar path, benching something very heavy where that bar path then matters, it can really sneak up on you. Um, yeah, Chase, you already talked about how you like to distribute the intensity. I have this one relevance to your goal. Like if someone's just trying to build up pec size, or if they're going for a big 1RM, do you program the bench differently based off of that person's, specifics?
More so, those are kind of almost intermingled, right? Like we see that hypertrophy it increases as we are going up in weight with the bench. But I really don't have anybody who's just like, yeah, man, I want huge pecs. Everyone that comes to me is mostly just wanting to get stronger. So we're mainly focusing on just how heavy we can get the bench, and then a byproduct of that is just the hypertrophy and their chest increases.
Yeah. That's one thing I think that people oftentimes, conflate and forget is that for most lifters, most of the time, it's really one and the same. So
Mhm.
it's like whenever you're attempting to specialize in your 1RM and you're just like doing a lot of tapering singles, like a lot of board press practice, a lot of slingshot bench, stuff like that to really work out the single. I'm not expecting you to put, another 2 pounds on your pack across 6 weeks of doing that. But when it comes to like a standard volume block, how you're gauging your increases through rep increases or increases in the weight on the bar, like it's going to increase everything. Matthew Smith undercover in the chat saying hello. Hey Matt, feel free to ask some questions. We have a good bit of people in the chat today. Is what I'm seeing on my end. So if you're here, sound off, ask some questions for us about the bench. But yeah, so whether you're going for a 1RM or just size, I think for people who are a little bit, on the very specific committee, the itty bitty titty committee, and you need to increase your bench size. I don't know if chasing your 1RM is really your best idea because you probably just have to taper volume down. But if you just aren't in the pursuit of general strength, they'll almost just kind of happen
Yeah.
independently, or not independently, but they'll happen without thinking about it. And then introducing accessories. When do you think is the earliest that you want to introduce a bench accessory, Chase?
Um, uh, there's some several considerations. Definitely, if someone is, has their eyes set on competing, we've got to go ahead and start practicing maybe some pause bench, doing some pin bench, some overload work, some slingshot. But more so, it's just whether they want to increase their bench or not. Kind of like we discussed this a little bit with the press. There's kind of a deciding factor once you hit kind of the more intermediate style of programming, where one of the two of the press or the bench has to kind of progress, and the other one kind of just maintains. I hate to kind of say that word, but there it's kind of thrown off to the side. Whereas whatever you pick is really it's hit it hard. Um, what do you have to say about that, Alex?
I have nothing to say about that because I'm playing with the slides. So you go to
Gotcha.
hell.
Well, here I'll read Matthew's
Yeah, you read
question
Matt's
then.
comment. That's probably
So we
super
got
helpful.
Matthew Smith undercover. I've been going to the gym for the past 5 months, going on to 7. I'm trying to lose weight, but struggle with being motivated. Bear in mind, I'm vaccinated. Can I go to the gym and give a minor a BG? What?
I laughed. I thought it was funny. No, do not give a minor any sort of BJs. I think that would be a little bit inappropriate.
Yeah,
Past
definitely
five to
would.
7 months, struggling to lose weight, being motivated. Yeah, dog. I don't know. I think that starting strength really isn't the cheerleading space for motivation. I think there's a lot of sectors of the fitness market that are kind of the rah rah go get 'em type. That's certainly not my job. I don't think it's Chase's job either. I've had a
No,
few
no.
people with online coaching who have thought that's kind of what the situation is going to be. It's really not. I don't think starting strength is really a good place to go for that. I don't know. Go look up some like bodybuilding motivational videos. Watch Ronnie Coleman
Yeah.
screaming lightweight.
Go hire a trainer, not a coach.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to think about it as kind of as a project that you are slowly working and chipping away at.
Hmm.
Like you're learning how to play the piano. You're doing something that's like very complicated. If it wasn't complicated, everyone would be jacked and at 10% body fat year round. Virtually no one is, right? So you got to give it the
Hmm.
credit that it's due. But good joke though. I did chuckle. Right. So we're going to go over our movement options. Basically, just kind of list of the bench accessories, and then we'll talk about the considerations that we like to have for all of them. It's going to be things like volume, things like weight range, when we typically like to introduce them. So we'll start with like the partial range of motion stuff, which is going to be your pin bench or your block press. Chase, how often are you doing these guys?
More so out of this list, I've more programmed pin benches. We don't have an incline, so we that's kind of a specialty. Don't really mess with grip width variations.
Hold on. Just stick to pin and block for right
Gotcha.
now,
Okay.
and then
Okay.
talk about your thoughts on those.
So yeah, we use more. I personally programmed more of pin benches. I like those with an overload. I think what kind of gets a lot of people is that as they're trying to progress the bench, kind of sort of like the squat, you kind of have that hesitation, that fear moment of, oh fuck, this is really heavy because it's locked out over your shoulder.
Hmm.
It's almost in a vital situation to where if you're not used to controlling a bunch of heavy weight or just having weight in your hands in general, I think the pin bench will definitely help increase that. that strength of mind of knowing that you're able to push on something heavy and not freak out.
Yeah, it's not going to like snap your wrists back,
Exactly.
basically. I'll have a lot of people do this near milestone weight. So it's like, hey, you're getting a little antsy and you're like 215, you're going to hit 225 soon. Go take out 225 off some pins or some blocks, and you'll be like, oh, okay,
Mhm.
this is just another weight. Same thing with 275, 315, 65, so on and so forth. 315 tends to be a really big milestone for people, and they get very nervous around it, and that's totally understandable. But to explain what a pin bench is, it is benching inside of a safety rack or a power cage, whatever you want to call it, and then you are lowering the bars slowly down to the safety arms. You aren't completely relaxing under them. You are pressing up off of those safety arms. The block press or the board press, depending on who you're talking to, that's going to be someone holding basically like a piece of wood up around your chest. You're going to lower your arms down to those boards and then pop off of them. The reason why I like the board press a lot is because the way that that person's going to be handling the board or the block, it's going to be angled, right? So it really helps facilitate the bar path backwards, because when you're going off of it, it's already angled back towards your shoulder. The pin bench, as on the other side of that, the pins are always going to be flat. Unless you're in like a very unique situation, the pins are going to be flat. You can't really do this in straps. But if you're doing a pin bench, it's always flat, so you kind of have to calibrate the bar path off of it. If you're doing a board press, it's angled for you already, because like the way that our
Mhm.
chest is shaped is we have the arch, the person holding the boards, the bar path is set for you.
Mhm.
So I really like the pin bench and the board press if you can do it. In terms of like volume considerations, this isn't something that you should be doing for like, oh, okay, I'm going to get some volume in, so I'm going to do pin bench for 12s. That's not really something you should consider. The pin bench and board press are things that you want to hit for relatively low reps and heavy. They don't have to be past 100% of your 1 rep max. So like a rack pull, for example, like a rack pull, you can just hit one set of 5, hit it like 110, 15% of your deadlift. Easy peasy, works great. Um, Mr. Dr. Sir, we're talking about my favorite lifts. It's everybody's favorite lift, man. Just trying to grow these chesticles. They're just really the only important muscle, I think. Hopefully Chase does a bench block soon. That's a good question,
No,
Chase. When are you going to be specializing in the bench?
never, man.
Never? Ah,
I don't
damn.
know. Like I really don't give a fuck about the bench. Like I've
Banned. Go to
really,
jail
I know
immediately.
I've relatively gotten it somewhat heavy. Like I think my best is 435, 430.
Hmm.
I didn't really care to push it any further. I saw it more as, is this helping my press or not?
Yeah, just a dirty press fetishist.
Hmm.
This is crazy. But yeah, so the pin press and board press, they're great lifts. I strongly recommend them. I would implement them in a very similar vein to rack pulls for sure.
Hmm.
Mr. Dr. Sir said, Chase got me to 370. He can probably do it for everybody. And Mr. Dr. Sir means body weight, by the way. So Mr. Dr. Sir is now 370 pounds of muscle.
Totally, man.
Hmm. Now these are some cool ones: the close grip bench and the wide grip bench. How do you feel about grip variations in your bench press, Chase?
I usually more so use these for injuries, or if someone is having a lot of discomfort in their shoulders. I'll affect their grip width, but as far as progressing these as like a staple for accessories, I would choose the close grip just so I can have that safe of mind of I'm not going to damage anyone's pecs. The pecs are extremely subjected to a lot of load with the bench, and then the wider grip just kind of forces the pecs to work even harder. So I'm not worried about doing anything wide, but I would rather choose a close grip bench.
Yeah, so between close grip and wide grip, these are pretty self-explanatory, but essentially all we're doing is moving the grip based off of what we consider to be standard or normalized. The way that starting strength likes to normalize that is so that when you're descending, your forearm is vertical to the ground. So your forearm is not all the way out here, it's not in there either. Your forearm is perpendicular to the ground when you've reached the bottom of the rep. So when we're talking about close grip, it's moving your grip in from that position or out from that position. I really like to make these calls based off that individual person. So if that person really likes to tuck their elbows and they try to get that, like canted forearm angle no matter what, I'll be like, hey, you know what, loser, you're going to do a wide grip bench press to, get comfortable using your pecs. And if that person takes a normally really wide grip, they really try to arch into it, shorten the range of motion up. We're going to go with a close grip. One way you can also think about this is that the close grip will almost always have a longer range of motion. The wide grip will have a shorter range of motion. So when you're modifying your stress levels, you want to think about it in relationship to that. So it's like one of my favorite accessories. It's like, hey, you've just finished, doing your volume work at, let's say 275 or so. Go down to like 205, do your close grip work paused. It's great. It's like, it's not super stressful, huge range of motion, big stimulus to the triceps, delts, everything involved. So the close grip, you can hammer it with volume. The wide grip, I've noticed that it's a little bit less tolerant of volume for the reasons that Chase was talking about. So it's like, it's just a lot of stress on the pecs. The shoulders are very open, you know. Um, it's not something that I like to typically give people something for really high reps. Pete had a good question here. Pete Yaz in the chat. He said, when and how do you program slingshot? Chase.
I've used it for just the kind of the similar process of like the pin bench. It's an overload. Now it's really freaky because at the top you don't have any support, and you know that you don't have any pins there, so it's not like you can just you have this safety outage, right?
Yeah.
But I again I would use this as similar to what Alex was saying with like how we do a rack pull, very low reps, low number of sets. And again, just to get you familiar with having something heavy and grinding on it if we need to. So that way, whenever it comes meet day or just whatever day that we're peaking on, we know that, hey, look, I've slingshotted, 315, whereas my best right now is at 275.
Yeah, like strength of slingshot really kind of depends on this one. Like if you have like the normal red one, like you can program it for a decent amount of volume, like more than you think. If you have like the black one, I believe the black one is the heaviest one.
Yeah,
Um,
I have the black one, and man, that is a trip. It is
well,
fun.
exactly, it's a bench shirt basically. But like if you
Yeah.
have the black one, like if you're using anything close to your normal benching weights, you're going to be able to do it for like an extra 4 or 5 reps for most people, though they can get a whole lot out of that slingshot. So if you want to keep it within kind of like a relevant for strength purposes rep range, it's going to be like 1 to 4 reps for the most part. It's got to be really heavy. The considerations, it's like that's still going to fatigue your hands. That's still going to fatigue your forearms from now holding a weight that like you aren't super adapted to. So like let's say
Mhm.
Chase, like I said, he said the guy's benching 275. He puts on the black slingshot, like let's say he's going to be able to take out 315. That's going to be a lot on his wrists, his
Oh
triceps,
yeah.
all that stuff. So it's like you got to really consider program the stress carefully there for the slingshot. But yeah, I think it's really good for getting over like pec injuries, shoulder injuries. Like if it hurts just the bottom of your bench press, for example, you can throw a slingshot on if you have one. It's good. Yeah, Pete said he has the camo one. I don't know where the camo one is. I think the camo one,
I have no idea.
it's either the middle or the lightest one. I'm not sure. Yeah, he has yeah. So this is the Mark Bell slingshot, by the way. If you just look up bench press slingshot, you'll find it. Essentially, it's like an elastic apparatus that goes around your arms, and then it has this elastic band that goes around your chest. So as you lower your arms in the bench press, that elastic around the chest stretches, and it helps you shoot it back up. Very similar to a bench press. All right, so on to the third one that we have on our list here. Now the fourth, the tempo and paused work. How often are you using that stuff, Chase? Oh, I think Chase DC'd. Oh, RIP Chase. We'll see if he gets back into this one. His internet has been pooping out a little bit. Okay, so just me and all the people in the chat. We have 10 people in the chat, so talk to me, so I'm not here by myself. Um, yeah, Pete, Mr. Dr. Sir, and Matt so far. But yeah, so we're going to talk about tempo work and paused work. So the eccentric portion, so the lowering portion of the bench press is already heavily loaded. And for most people, I would say that takes a little bit over a second. There's not really anyone who like accidentally benches very slow. So introducing a longer tempo to that on the eccentric, that can have like a not a negligible, have like a really real fatigue cost. One of the ways that I like to do tempo work on the bench press is actually a tempo on the eccentric, or excuse me, the concentric. So it's like you're not punching off as hard as you can. You're maybe punching off the first inch pretty hard, and then you're going slow, slow, slow to finish. That way, you're kind of you're getting accustomed to moving a weight slowly on the way up. I wouldn't consider it like staple work to do, but tempo work for sure can definitely be a good asset. I do really like paused work. I would say my most common bench accessory that I prescribe to people is going to be paused benching, and the reason for this is for leg drive. Um, Mr. Doctor Sir, he said, I'm so chest dominant. I don't know if it does anything. That's good that you have juicy pecs, man. That's wonderful. I'm very happy for you. But yeah, the slingshot does. Go get the slingshot black. I believe that's the strongest one. And then like go take out 60 pounds, 70 pounds higher than your normal bench, and you're like sick. That's really fun. But yeah, so the pause bench. The reason I like the pause bench so much is that it takes kind of either the elastic rebound that you're getting out of your flesh out of the equation or your leg drive, right? So I think the most stark difference that I have for someone, for one of my own clients, is that on his volume sets, he just hit 225 for 9 using like a good good leg drive elasticity out of the chest, and then his pause bench after that with no leg drive was like 185 for like 6. You know, there can be a pretty stark difference. So like the reason I like to do pause is for people who are very athletic. If you are good at gaming leg drive, you will be you should really do some pause benching, I think, that's why all the competition stuff that you'll see for powerlifting, any sort of comp bench, it's always going to be with that strict pause. It's just because there are a lot of people who can get a lot of rebound out of bouncing the thing off their chest and really throwing their chest and hips into it. So pause bench, I would say that's number one for me. We have to address these ones because they're in every commercial gym. Incline and decline. I will sometimes use a light incline, so maybe like 15, 25 degrees. Never really too much. It's just really only if the person has it. It's like if the overhead press is going to be too taxing on your shoulder for whatever reason, for whatever sport that you're doing at the time, you can throw in some incline work. Like it's just kind of light variation. I would treat it similar to like a close grip or a wide grip bench press. Like if you just want to change up some joint angles for the sake of things not being stale, throw in the incline work. I really don't like the decline work terribly much. I think it's hard to brace into it effectively. We are so used to arching our chests up like this during all of our benching patterns that if you're doing like a decline bench at any like noticeable decline, you almost have to do like this little crunch into it, and the arm goes back like this, almost like a dip, rather than the bench pattern that we're used to. So people will go into a decline bench thinking they can handle weights that they typically handle, but then just not be able to do that. But you will see some monsters at the gym who like do that decline press with like 2 inches with like 6 plates, and you're like, that's awesome. Good for those guys. And then we'll go into the other chest work. Now these ones, ancillary, accessory, whatever the hell we want to call them, but they're definitely relevant to the bench press, I would say. The big one is going to be the dumbbell bench. It's the thing that most closely approximates it, so it probably has more carryover than the rest. Is the dumbbell bench. Grabbing 2 dumbbells, you get a nice long range of motion out of it. You have the dip, the lying tricep extension, which we'll talk about afterwards, and then the overhead press. For the dumbbell bench, I will almost always do those with a slight incline just because it's easier to set up. I'm not really having too many people do like a dumbbell bench press if they're using like 50 pounds, for example. Like I'm having somebody, it's like, okay, you can, dumbbell incline the 80s. That's probably a good time to introduce those. Getting that set up on a perfectly flat bench is just really annoying, frankly. So if you've ever had to like kick up, 100-pound dumbbells on your shoulder and lay back with them, it's just kind of a big pain. So I like the incline bench for that one because you're still getting a long range of motion. You're still using a ton of pec. Just the setup is easier. I don't think there's too big of a difference. So for the dumbbell bench, I almost always do like a soft incline on that one. For the dip, I really like the dip as just a general mass builder for the area. I don't think it has terribly much carryover to the bench press, unfortunately. I've had a lot of guys who can dip, 135, myself included, for a few reps, and then you'd think their bench press would be like 365. It's not. It's so specific. If you're kind of an athletic person, you can really game the dip. You can really kind of turn it into this weird sort of pendulum motion where you're just extending your elbow rather than pushing through with your chest. So the dip can definitely get a little bit weird. The lying tricep extension, let's see if we still have that slide from last accessory episode. Yeah, we do. Here we go. Even though Chase has left us, we can still see his stomach here. Underneath this is a finely honed 6-pack is what we're looking at. But yeah, so this is the lying triceps extension. So if you see LTE, you don't see that acronym too commonly outside of starting strength circles, but this is what it is. It's a skull crusher, except you're reaching back quite far. So it's like a pullover and a skull crusher kind of at the same time. I think these have a really great carryover to the bench press is because you're getting a really long range of motion out of the tricep. You're strengthening the shoulder. You're not fatiguing the pec terribly much. Like it's a really good way to slot in some extra tricep volume without beating up your pecs. without beating up your front delts as well. So like, let's say, for example, on that last slide, on our last slot here, we had the overhead press down here. The overhead press, it's going to interfere with the bench a lot. You're taking out a heavy weight overhead. You're tiring your traps out. You're tiring out, some of the upper pec fibers, tiring out the front delts. It can really drain on you, right? So if you're benching 3 times a week and you're trying to put in a 4th slot for upper body, that press can have a lot of interference. The lying tricep extension, it really just won't have that much interference. The loads are going to be lighter for the first part. You can get a nice long range of motion out of the tricep. Andy Baker seems to love dips. He does. Andy Baker's a big boy. I think he would probably share similar opinions to me about using it for mass building, because I really like them just for people who are trying to get jacked. I don't think, like, I've never had a single person going into like a bench competition be like, okay, we need to make sure your dip stays with your bench. Yeah, I've never really found that to be super successful. I think that at the peak of my dipping, I dipped 155 for 1, almost body weight when I was like 170. My bench press sucked at the time. They're just so radically different. But the LTE, really like the LTE. The Skull Crusher is just the version where it's a lot shorter. You're keeping the elbow pointed up at the ceiling. Like, you want your upper arm, your humerus, to be vertical or perpendicular to the floor in that situation. You're just lowering your elbows down to your face. So that's the Skull Crusher. That's what most people do. But for us, we really, really like the LTE. And then I guess for the last one, we should talk about the overhead press in relationship to a bench accessory. We'll go back. See here. Okay, cool. I wonder if Chase is going to come back. Here we go. Pete, he said, in my honest opinion, hopefully you wouldn't be lying to us, Pete, dips are harder on your shoulders than they are worth as an accessory. Yeah. It's like, if you can get people who are young and, the boy's back.
Sorry about that, dude. It is. My computer is running on like blocks right now.
Yeah, I know. I'm still trying. I mailed you some internet from last episode. Hopefully the postal service will get their shit together and get that to you soon.
Hopefully.
But yeah, so yeah, Pete, they have like a legitimate sense of shoulder stress on the dip. I think one of the functions of this is like equipment. A lot of dip stands are really wide. You kind of have to. I really like to match the handles up with just your shoulder width. If the shoulder width, if the handle width is outside of your shoulders, it's terribly awkward. It doesn't really give you much more than that. So a lot of people will try to do dips on like really wide commercial gym platforms. Almost all of the assisted dip platforms are like way too wide for most people. It's like, if you have to do assisted dips, you probably don't have the widest shoulders in the world. Maybe you do, but you're just a really heavy guy. I'm not sure. But the grip width really impacts the dips a lot. All right, Chase, we were just going to talk about interference from the overhead press and the bench. So it's like, if you're trying to max your bench, trying to get the chesticles up, how do you feel about programming the press? Are you programming it for maximum strength? Are you trying to get some volume work in there? How are you going about that?
I still kind of want to peak it a little bit. I really don't think that the press, if you program it right, is going to take too much off of the bench. Like, if you're hounding a bunch of singles, like let's say you're doing like 8 really heavy singles, yeah, you're going to have a little bit of a problem there trying to progress your bench. But 3 or just even one rep of a heavy single, it shouldn't mess with your bench too much, man.
Yeah, like the lower rep stuff. It's for me, frankly, I'm actually, you know what? I'm interested to hear your response to this one, Jace. But for me, the thing that gets the most fatigued when I overhead press is like my upper back and my lower back.
Really?
Like triceps seem fine. I have a bunch of neck injuries from grappling and everything like that, so that gets fucked up. But like shoulders fine, triceps are fine. That's all totally fine. It's just like, man, I feel like I'm laying back a little bit with like 185, 205, and I'm like, I'm gonna die. Do you find that with most people? Like, where's the big fatigue cost for most of your pressing guys?
If they're really fucking up the press, they're throwing it out in front. They're probably getting more fatigue like on the bicep, kind of the brachialis, a little bit of their shoulders, but the vast majority of people, like I'm dealing with such a group to where they don't really feel much fatigue anywhere. It's just a completely body fatigue from maybe the squat that we just did, or just
Right.
the
They're just like,
deadlifts.
I'm tired. I can't tell where.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I think that's all we had to talk about in terms of movement options. Yeah, so just to recap, by the way, for like dips, like LTEs, dumbbell benching, all of those, you're not going to be doing those for maximum weight. Do those for
Yeah.
higher reps. Program those for not for increases in volume, but it's like find a volume target that you can recover from, aim to increase volume or aim to increase rep count into each of your sets or weight just a little bit each time. Like a close grip bench, you can get heavy, same thing with wide grip, stuff like that. But like a dumbbell bench, I don't want you to rush to hit the 110s for a set of 3. There's no point in doing that. I would much rather you hit like the 80s for a set of 12. It's logistically going to be a lot easier. It's not going to be a big pain in the ass to get them racked. And I think that the benefits that you'll get out of it are pretty good. Chase, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. I'm gonna pull up some benching videos,
Okay.
and then oh, here we go. Wait, hold on a second. Perfect. This is exactly what I want. Chase,
Awesome.
talk to us about your pecs.
I'll just blabber about some shit. So, with all this considerations in mind, let's talk about just the movement in general. So, the bench right now has or I shouldn't say right now, but it does have the shortest range the shortest range of motion basically out of any lift and the shortest kinetic chain. So meaning you can kind of hound this a lot, whereas like on the press, due to its long kinetic chain, needs to be practiced. Same thing with the clean, same thing with the snatch. Not so much with the deadlift. If we think about it, the kinetic chain really isn't that long. And the squat, it's kind of half and half, I think. You need to practice a little bit with the squat where the knee position is and just getting comfortable leaning over. But the bench doesn't really take that much practice. So a lot of this consideration with trying to progress it is going to have to do with just trying to get the bench really fucking heavy.
Melchior Caspar, the chat, resident wizard. He said, thanks for the
Yeah, man.
240p resolution.
I don't know what if my computer has
Really
a virus
missed YouTube year 2004. Yeah. Chase is
if
doing
it's all
some
my
old YouTube
internet
poop stuff.
porn. I don't know what it is, man.
It's crazy. Chase has gone back in time to find webcams. He dug up a time vault from the year 1999.
Yeah, man.
But yeah, so we're gonna watch some bench presses now. I try to find like a decent sampling between like some of the heavier ones, some of the singles. So it's like Aaron, for example, we have a light volume set from Aaron and then a heavier single, so we can kind of compare the two. But we'll replay this heavy set. And the one thing to note is that right here, as Aaron's getting set up, this isn't his terminal setup, but you're able to see like some space in between his lower back, right? And when a lot of people don't wear a belt and they'll just wear a shirt, the shirt will fall down and that gets obscured. But a lot of people when they're starting think their back needs to be entirely flat against the bench the entire time, or the entire length of the bench. That's not true. When you're squeezing your chest up, kind of pushing your belly up to the ceiling, there will be that little arch there for a lot of people, and that's totally fine.
Alex, here's a hot take. What do you think about belts on a bench? Do you think they do anything? Do you think they help?
I like them because I can physically feel my lats. As I pull my lats down to my waist, I can feel my lats pushing into the belt. It's like a good tactile feedback for me to like have something to bite into. As I'm bracing and getting set up, squeezing my shoulders down, I can feel that belt pushing out, and I'm like, okay, I know I'm locked in.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this was too light of a set from Aaron. How do you feel about it? Were you watching this bench?
Yeah, they're pretty easy. I think he bounced a few of these, but for the most part, man, like these look pretty solid.
Yeah, I think the single that we're going to watch after this is, I'm going to say 340. It's still like an at 8-ish single. We have Nahomi in the house. He says, when body weight is at a good place, how do I adjust my body comp to increase lean muscle and then decrease fat and slowly gain quality mass? That's a long question, my dude. It's a very long question. Chase, you kick us off with that one.
When body weight is a good place, I don't know, adjustment. Man, I think a lot of this is just don't be afraid gaining some body fat. I mean, this is kind of inevitable if you're trying to gain body mass. Just look, there's a ton of diets out there. It's easy to lose body fat, but it's hard as fuck to gain a lot of body weight, some good quality mass, some muscle mass. So I mean, I really wouldn't worry about adjusting anything to do with your lean muscle mass going into a comp. Just get really fucking strong, and all that stuff is going to kind of settle its stuff out.
I'm on the other end. I don't worry about scale weight at all. Like if you're not a weight class athlete, I work with a lot of athletes who have specific weight classes for grappling or for lifting or whatever that is. If that's you, then you should care about your body weight. If you don't care about your body weight. go by how fat you are. You know, like what
Mhm.
rough percentage is your body weight, or if your body weight is body fat. So it's like if you're looking at yourself and you're like, man, I have like a really high percentage of body fat and I don't feel that muscular, you got to kind of triage your problems, realize that being muscular takes a lot of time, a lot of dedication, a lot of hours. Much more so than losing fat does. This single was still flying. I think my boy has 365 here and like a true at 10 single. How do you feel about the single,
Mhm.
Chase?
Looked pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think he kind of slid around a little bit at the end, kind of after the touch, but the majority of this, man, this is pretty good.
Yeah, this is pretty good. Yeah, I want to see a little bit more intention with the leg drive. The legs are kind of
Yeah,
collapsing in a little bit. But yeah, so Nahom, it's one of those things where, you know, if you're like, oh, hey, I want to be 175 pounds, it's like 175 pounds lean, you probably don't even know what that looks like because you've never
yeah.
been there before, you know? So you just kind of go with the, do I want to be more muscular? If so, yes, keep gaining muscle, you know? If you want to be more lean for a little bit, be more lean for a little bit. Understand that it's like a long project. You have a lot of time, you know? So it's not like you have a photo shoot coming up in 6 months. It's a project that you have like a good amount of time to, you know, to invest in. In terms of adjusting body comp and recomping, you can definitely, you know, recomping exists conceptually and in practice. If you're very advanced and doing things normally, it's kind of hard to pull off. But you know, what I would say, I'm going to pull up another video while I'm talking about this. But what I would say, it's just like, if it's your intention to gain muscle mass, and then you go through a period of, let's say, 5 months, right? And you've only gained 5 pounds in that 5 months, your tolerance for error in weighing and measuring could be 3.5 pounds. You know, so if at the end of that 5 months you're like, I think I've gained 5 pounds, I'm not really sure. You're too close to the confidence interval for it to really matter. You know, like you're trying to maximize your rate of gain. So you want to do everything in your power to ensure that you have gained that weight. So it's like if your weight fluctuates, you know, um, this is another warm-up single for Alex. This is another Alex here. I'll play this again, or warm-up double, excuse me. You know, so if you're trying to main gain, I hear the phrase main gain a lot. The amount of weight that you're gaining can be so little that it's well within a confidence interval for how much water that you have. Did you take a dump that morning? Are you carrying a lot of fiber in your intestine? Things like that. You just can't really be sure. And what you don't want is to get on the other end of like 6 months and then have not really gained any sort of quality muscle mass, you know, just because you were trying to gain too slowly. So
Dude, this is like a badass. Is he building like a cabin?
he's a contractor, and I think this is just at his job site.
It's fucking cool, man. He just
It
has a rack and a bench, and he just loads it up in his work truck.
is, I'm pretty sure that's the move here.
That's
How'd you feel
cool,
about
man.
this? How'd you feel about this double? This was like, I think, a warm up double
Yeah,
before a
the,
top set.
these are pretty solid. Again, what
I
I
have no
kind of
complaints
focus
here.
more on whenever I see someone bench is just making sure that they're driving their feet, reinforcing the arch, and their shoulder position isn't changing on the bench. And those are the two big things. The rest is if someone really fucks up on the bench, you'll know.
Yeah, you'll very much so know. That's a very good point.
Yeah.
Matthew Smith, I'm going to read the comment just because it's there. It's funny. Wait, so if you do more push-ups for mid chest, you can do it without child underwear? Classic,
Mhm.
classic question here. I love it. This is Mariah, one of the lifters. She's hitting 100 in this, I believe, for a double. Let's see how this goes. It slowed down a little bit. I think a
Mhm.
third rep was there, but it would have been like a very slow third rep. What do you think, Chase?
I agree. I don't really like her touch position, man.
Think it's too high?
Seems just a little bit. I like to see just a tiny bit lower, more towards the sternum here. And I think she would kind of feel a little bit more confident touching too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is like deep. The elbows are very deep on this one. If I
Mhm.
pause this at like the bottom frame, Oop. Let's go back a little bit. Eh, beep. It's so hard to pause with Windows Media Player.
Mhm.
But yeah, so she's touching. If we kind of think about the curve that the chest is creating during the bench press, you almost want to touch it like the apex of that curve. So, like if I'm squeezing my chest up, the highest point for my chest is likely around here. That's basically where I want to touch. What you'll see with people who are like well endowed in the stomach, in the fields of stomachs, what they'll do is they'll just like create that higher touch point with their massive belly, and then they'll touch the bar down to their belly. Sick. It's a technique that you can use if you're morbidly obese. That's great. But for normal people, as you squeezing your chest up, you want to think about that touch point basically being the highest point of your rib cage. For Mariah in this situation, it would be, maybe about like 1.5 inches, 2 inches lower, maybe.
Hmm.
Kind of depends on what we'll see on the camera angle. But yeah, that's really the only thing I can see going on here. It's just that I want the touch point to be a little bit lower, but bar speed was really good.
Yeah.
How do you instruct people on finding a good touch point? What's your progression for teaching that?
If they're really fucking this up without me, physically touching them and just kind of giving them what was this called like back in the day with kids, like the little cherry bomb or whatever, um, or a raspberry on their chest. I
Are you
would
talking about when
physically
someone like
grab.
grinds their knuckles into your
Yeah,
sternum and
yeah,
it
yeah, like you
burns?
did this. Yeah, exactly.
I
I'm
don't
not.
know what that's called, but I remember what it is.
Yeah, I'm not doing that to clients just for the sake of security here. But like I'll physically touch them. I'll give them a tactile cue. If that's not enough, I'll physically move their arms into position. Right. So I'll kind of get their arm here, and I'll forcefully force their arm into position. Kind of correct my elbow here, and I'll give them some feedback more of how the bar is going to feel in their hands and where
Hmm.
their elbow positioning needs to be instead
Okay.
of an actual tactile touch
Yeah. Well,
on the
so
chest.
that's a similar approach to what I do. I think most people end up doing this. It's like, you'll do the first set, empty bar, see how the touch point navigates on its own.
Hmm.
If they end up going way too low, way too high, which most people do because they think they're focused on the elbows too much, what I'll have them do is just pause at the bottom, right? And then I'll just adjust the bar. I'll grab it on either side, pick it up into the correct
Hmm.
position. I'll leave the bar there and be like, that's your touch point. Remember it, and the next time they'll normally be able to get it. This is James hitting 225 for another dub. Let's see how these go. Let's get some thoughts on this one, Chase. A very eager spotter.
Yeah, man, spotters are kind of a big decider of whether your lift is going to go smooth or not. So if you're kind of benching by yourself, you can kind of gauge whether you're going to make this a little bit more correctly with how well you can grind. But if you have someone there in front of you, just this guy has his angel arms out in front. It's pretty distracting, but
Angel arms,
uh,
yeah, because like it messes with where he's looking. So we'll
yeah.
pause at one of the worst frames. So this hand that this kid has right here, his in that frame left hand is directly over the lifter's eyeballs, right? It's really annoying to have something moving around like that.
Hmm.
But yeah, this is another one where it's like bar speed on rep one flies, right,
Yeah.
and then rep two it gets like oddly shaky and slow. I do not think this would have been there for a third, but this was a fine loading call for a double for the boy James. All right, so we have some questions in the chat. General question: I try to only eat carbs a few hours before I train. Is that enough? I crash from carbs energy-wise. It messes with my studies. So the setup here is that Mr. Dr. Sir is saying he doesn't have carbs all the time because it impacts his productivity, but he wants to make sure he's eating them around his training. What do you think, Chase?
If you're feeling fine throughout your workout, then you're probably eating enough carbs. If you're not, then you probably need to increase it. That's kind of how I gauge it. But if it's affecting you throughout your normal days, your recovery days, and just the days you're not training, I still think you need a certain amount of carbs to just hold normal body function. So you got to think that your body is kind of increasing um, its ability to perform as you're getting more and more strong. So you need to kind of up your carbs a little bit more, I think. I don't know. That kind of sounded retarded whenever I thought about it, but I don't know. I'm kind of babbling.
Only kinda. No,
Yeah.
no, there's some good points there. I mean, like for my guys who are doing a lot of activity, it's just like they're eating 500 to 700 grams
Mm,
of carbs. That's not atypical. In my diet, I eat very little fat. I do a lot of physical activity. I'm hitting over 500 on most days. Um, I really wouldn't worry about eating too many. In terms of saying that you'll crash frequently, try taking some walks after you eat. So it's like when you eat, and if you do have that bolus of carbs, go and take a walk afterwards. Kind of move around. Even if you find a project to do around the house, it's like go clean up your kitchen, go vacuum, go clean the garage out, something like that. If you're at home, just go walk around the office. If you're outside or walk around your university, just try to level out the blood sugar response, the insulin spiking after your meal. Physical activity seems to help with that. So if you're eating and then just having like this weird dramatic energy crash, try to do something, to kind of help yourself or coax through that. If you're only training, let's say once every other day or something like that, you don't really need to worry about carb totals too much, I don't think. If you're training a lot, if you're training, like 6-7 times a week or more than that, you definitely have to worry about it. And a question from my boy Freddie. Freddie has a good YouTube avatar. It's the guy from Tropic Thunder. Freddie, is leg drive necessary for someone like me that doesn't touch the bar low on my chest? What do you think?
Oh, definitely. So you got to think you have two ends of the arch, right, that we're trying to support on the bench. One end is the shoulders. So you performing scapular traction, thoracic extension, getting those shoulders dug in to where they won't slide. And you on the other end with you driving your feet. Those two ends of the arch need to be in constant contact or just there present as you're benching. So if you're not driving your feet effectively, getting your shoulders pinned on the bench, you are hamstringing yourself on your ability to actually drive hard on the bench.
Yeah, I mean, so Freddie, just give this a try. Try to take out a working weight, but just put your feet up on the bench.
Yeah.
Like go take
Do
out
like
whatever
a
your next
Larson
plan.
bench.
Yeah, go take out your next planned workout weight. Pretend you don't have any legs. Put them up on the bench, and then if it feels totally normal, you are an anomaly. That's awesome.
Hmm.
Congratulations, good for you. It's probably going to feel a little bit unstable. It's probably going to feel weaker. That's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's showing that you do need some amount of leg drive. It's like we want passive support, so you're not wobbling around, and so that arch on both ends is supported, like Chase was saying.
Hmm.
So you definitely need some amount of leg drive. Do you need an active heave, like a pause, heave? No, you don't need anything depending on our definition of need. But in terms of like developing the chest, developing the bench, is that necessary? I would say no, but it's definitely helpful. It's kind of like throwing your hips on the overhead press a little bit. Like you can do a strict press just fine. Like the lifting police aren't going to come to your house and tase you. But it'll probably help if you can figure out a way to move that bar faster out of the bottom.
Hmm.
All right, let's find another video here. Chase, are you a big leg drive? Do you a big heaving guy on your bench?
No. So I've had some knee tendonitis going on. So like I'm kind of almost with Freddie on this one to where like I hardly ever drive my feet and I can feel it. I know I kind of fuck up my bench whenever I do bench. That I need to drive my feet. So, there's some kind of ways that I will kind of help the knee tendonitis with just I think it's quad right now that I have. So I'll kind of move my feet around, but
Mm-hmm.
I still have to drive my feet. I need to do it more effectively if I were to actually drive my bench up a lot harder.
How do you feel about this question? Do you get cramps when you're benching, Chase? So Melchior, he says, I occasionally cramp in my right glute whenever I flex so hard when benching. Anyone have that happen? Yeah, Chase, what do you think?
Occasionally, as I was kind of getting my bench up high, I would, but my problem is that I arch the fuck out of my back and I get my butt off the bench.
What a surprise.
Yeah, Melkor, you probably are doing the same thing. So if your
Uh,
ass is coming up off the bench, you may be extending your hips a lot with the use of your glutes. So make sure that you're not doing that, and you're getting yourself in a position to where you can kind of mitigate that as best as possible.
I see glute cramping a lot on people who are shoving their knees out to the side. I'll hide this comment and then put myself on the thing so that we can see where I'm going. But if you are shoving your knees out like this, so if like let's say for example, like we're shoving our knees out on the squat, but on the bench, people really over exaggerate the hell out of that. You can have a really severe toe angle, shove the knees out. That's using a lot of glute to get that done. And if you're trying to drive like out rather than back into the bench, I see glute cramps all the time. It is like the most contracted point that your glutes are going to get into, basically. Like the shortest contracted length is a better way to say that. So yeah, glute cramps happen. I've noticed a lot of people who just don't get up during their bench press sessions. Like they're just like they bench and then they sit up and then they sit there for 3 minutes. It's like just get up and walk around, dog.
Yeah,
you know, go
yeah.
do some bodyweight squats if you notice that your glutes are going to be cramping. Like I only really notice that on people who sit down constantly. All right, so we got Dave benching. I think this is 220 for a triple here. We'll see how this goes. A little slow off the chest on rep one.
Hmm.
Thoughts, Chase?
Not bad. I think Dave, you're kind of waiting to get the bar back going to where it needs to be. So with the bench, this is not like how we normally argue our other lifts, where the bar needs to go in a straight vertical line up and down. The bench needs to go back to the shoulders to mitigate this moment arm that we've created in order to help our shoulders from impingement. Now Dave is kind of going straight up rather than straight back. I think he can kind of clear a lot of this up with his bar speed by getting the bar back a little bit faster.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Those are good points. I think, yeah, as you're throwing the bar back, the elbows are going to have to come out. So you won't be able to like do this with the bar. You're not going to like swoop your elbows forward to get it backwards. As you're coming off the chest, the elbows are going to have to come out. That's totally fine. Like I'll slap people's elbows in the way out, like physically. It's like hit it, get it out to the side. Like as you're rushing to get that bar backwards, the elbows are going to have to come out. That's totally okay. Wizard Caspar said you were both correct. My butt lifts sometimes, and I exaggerate the toe angle and space between the feet. I can try going narrower. Yeah, dog. Aim your feet straight down the bench away from you. You know, shove your knees, keep your knees in line with that. I even have some people who think about like squeezing the bench with their knees sometimes too. I've noticed that helps a lot of people. Any other thoughts for Melchior?
No, just like we were saying, just fix your feet. A lot of this will be fine.
Yeah, get your shit together, Melchior. God, the worst.
Mhm.
I think I have one more heavy double, I think, to see here. Okay. All right. And there it is. Okay. Yeah, so we're in the garage. I believe this is 105 kilos, not pounds. That's very important.
So here's kind of a. You saw how he unracked it.
Mm-hmm.
How do you tell people to unrack shit that's real heavy when they're by themselves? I kind of run into this problem a lot.
That's a
Um,
very good question.
I show people the Phil Meggers way of doing this, and it's fucking brilliant. How you kind of scoot yourself way back towards the end of the bench here, like almost like you're putting your shoulders directly underneath the bar, but then you slowly kind of walk yourself, kind of just like how your boy here is doing.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of just pinching it together, they actually kind of rotate the shoulder blades underneath the chest more. I don't know. Phil does a way better job of explaining it than I can, and it's amazing.
Yeah. I tell people to think about getting their armpits right under the bar. Like shove
Mhm.
your hips up in the air as high as you possibly can. Get your armpits right under the bar, and you'll probably be able to unrack the thing. Um, what I'll have, so let's see during his setup. So his bench is just like physically short. It's good to do this on long benches.
Mhm.
But what I will tell people to do is get the armpits right under the bar, and then they can put their feet up on the end of the bench, and then you can unrack it like a decline bench. So you'll
Yep.
see that typically with like a lot of heavy people who bench solo. Their hips are all the way up in the air. They're doing like this big decline motion. They're unracking it, and then they're sitting their feet down as they're doing it. Like it's an athletic thing. It takes an amount of skill to do. Um, at the peak of that unrack, so it's like when your hips are up in the air, you are in a tremendous amount of thoracic flexion and cervical flexion. So like if it irritates your neck to do that under load, probably don't do that because you are bending the fuck out of your back. Um, try it with light weights at first. But yeah, the unrack is something that we've been practicing from. So this is actually something that we've been doing for the unrack. It's like, hey, touch something heavy, work on your unrack a little bit. Um, One thing I think with his unrack is that he's been trying to, and you can see it in this frame a little bit. He'll like pull his elbows down.
Mhm.
So rather than unracking out like this, he'll pull his elbows down and try to physically do this as he's unracking. I don't really think that works. I think you need to unrack like out and then pull it down a little bit. What do you think?
Oh yeah, I did
Yeah.
too. Otherwise, that's a good way to fuck up your elbows. Kind of get some tendonitis there.
Yeah, it's just like, hey, you got to just this weird giant straight arm lat pull down,
Yeah,
but also go up at the same time. It's really hard. So the get the elbows out to the side, get your armpits under it. Those are all good
I
cues for
think
this.
he actually kind of realized that too, because then like on these next few frames, he's re-pinching his shoulder blades. Because I mean,
Mm-hmm.
as your elbows kind of shoot out and stuff like that, you're losing scapular retraction and stuff. But it's an easy case to solve, just as how Alex here is doing. So yeah, that's perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then we can see that like rep 2 is faster than rep 1, so it's like the setup on rep 1 wasn't the best, but he fixes it on rep 2.
Mhm.
So it's like that's totally fine. And this is another one, just like we were talking about Dave before, that he needs to get the bar back faster. And this one, he basically goes straight up off his chest. It's a heavy front delt raise, and then he has to pull it back too. On the second rep, it does a better job of getting backwards up off his chest. So,
Mhm.
and that's it for Alexi. Chase, parting shots for the deadlift. Anybody who has any last minute questions, let us know while we're wrapping up here.
About the deadlift or the
Or
bench?
the bench, excuse me. The deadlift of the upper body.
The bench, um, just some safety shit of if you're doing this by yourself, try not to collar anything. You rather be embarrassed dramatically than dead, or at least I hope so. Or I would personally. But the bench, yeah, it is the bench.
It's the
That's all I
bench.
gotta
That's
say.
what people care about. They ask me how much you
Yeah,
bench. Yeah, Mark Bell's old website used to be like howmuchyoubench.net, which is just like have fun typing that in. That's great. Now
yeah,
it's just Mark Bell slingshot. But yeah, bench, it's very important to lift. Train it with a lot of volume. I think the bench is one of the first place you can really like try some jazz with the programming, you can really get creative with it. You can really try a lot of different stuff. Like the deadlift, I would not recommend advanced experimentation of the deadlift because it's like,
yeah,
hey, congratulations, now you're having a hard time tying your shoes for 3 days. That's probably a little bit unpleasant because you decided to add 4 sets of 8 on your deadlift. you know but in the bench press you can have some fun with it. So be brave, go bench some weights. I think that's it for today. Make sure to subscribe, all that stuff, if you're still hanging out with us, and then thanks for watching, guys.